Barkley?
Skip, you shouldn't have no problem with this. Because you ain't had no problem with him not making peace with Isaiah. You ain't had no problem with that, right, Skip? Skip, it's tough. And this is what I tell people when you get into this business. And a lot of times it's hard for people, Skip, because that means you're going to have to criticize guys you played with and you played against. And everybody's not willing to do that. I was willing to do that from the jump. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to call it like I see it. And I've had guys like, man, bro, you were hard. I was like, bro, I got a job to do. You do your job, you make my job easier. You don't do your job, you still make my job easy. Because I'm going to tell it like I see it. Skip, and that's the hardest part about being a professional athlete. Because we don't like to hear that we've done something wrong or we've said something wrong. And that's why I've considered myself very fortunate that I've always had friends that tell me what I needed to know, not what I wanted to hear. And Michael, you got to tell him what he wants to hear. You got to tell him you're doing an unbelievable job. Bruh, do you see the lack of success you're having in Charlotte? But Charles, there's nothing you can do. You have a job, you have a responsibility to do. You did your job. And again, remember, Skip, I told you, there can be no freedom without forgiveness. I'm sorry.
Okay. I do have some sympathy for Charles Barkley here. And I agree with your point. You do your job the right way. You do it objectively on players that you played with and against. Love that about you. And I like that about Charles. He made a tough love comment about his dear friend Michael Jordan that ended their relationship because he went inside behind the scenes and said, what was the comment? Let me get it exactly here. You've got to quit hiring, stop hiring them kiss asses, is the way he put it. Okay. I've told you from the start, Michael Jordan was the greatest performer I ever saw in any sport, but some of the things that drove him were not pretty, and you're not going to get me to condemn him here today for what made him great. Yes, he was ruthless. Yes, he was heartless. Yes, he took no prisoners, and he constantly was feuding or beefing with this guy or that guy, and sometimes he fabricated a feud just to fuel him. That's what he was made of. And if you were in his inner circle and you dared to cross him, you were crossed permanently off that list. There's no forgiveness in Michael Jeffrey Jordan. That's what made him great, because he played without remorse, without compunction. He did not care. He was cold-blooded. All that mattered was win at any cost. He wouldn't cheat, but at any emotional cost, he was going to beat you. Right. And the point here is that, do I love it? Away from basketball, what he did to Charles? No, I don't love it. But it is vintage, authentic Michael Jordan. So I'm sorry. And by the way, quick comment on Charles's comment. I don't believe that hiring kiss asses is why Michael has been the worst GM in the history of basketball. And I've often called him that. Again, you say I'm not objective about Michael Jordan, but I am about Jordan the GM. He is a pathetic picker of players, judge of talent. Yeah. And it's not because he surrounded himself with sycophants and quote-unquote friends. It's because he just doesn't have a great feel for what works in players who weren't as good as him. He keeps saying, I'm Michael Jordan. Why can't you be as good as I was? We can't. We're sorry. We can't. Right. So he's been the owner and operator of the Charlotte franchise for 13 years. They've made the playoffs 4 times and never won a playoff series in the NBA, where it seems like half the teams make the postseason. So again, you can't defend it, but I will defend Michael for just being Michael. It's not pretty. It's kind of ugly. But in sum total, it made for the greatest player or performer in the history of sports. I've never seen anything like Michael Jordan, and this was why. And Shannon, I witnessed him fabricate feuds one night with Vashawn Leonard, the Heat in January of the last dance year, 98. Vashawn Leonard's Heat had taken apart the Bulls in Miami. It was 90-72. And the return match was in February at the United Center. And somehow Michael decided that it was Vashawn who had mouthed off in Miami. And I don't think he had. So every free throw that Miami shot that night, every free throw Miami shot that Vashawn went back to be back on defense and stand at the far free throw line, Michael didn't occupy his space in the lane for the Bulls. He went back with Vashawn, leaned over and trash talked in his ear every free throw that Miami shot and basically told him, you ain't you know what. And how do you think you can guard me? And he torched Vashawn Leonard for 37 points. Well, that's just Jordan. It was ruthless. It was heartless. It was actually just wrong. But that's who he was, and that's why he was.
Skip, if we're friends and you tell me something that you believe is for my best interest, I'm not going to get upset. Now, Skip, if you divulge a secret, something that only my closest friends know, yeah, I'm going to forgive you. We're just not going to be on that level of friends. I'm going to go my way, you go your way. But I think Barkley offering an honest assessment of why he thinks Michael is not as successful as a general manager as he was as a player. I don't think that's grounds for him to no, I can't never speak to you again. How dare you criticize? Bruh, I got a job. You Skip, you just laid it out. 13, 14 years, 4 playoff appearances, never getting out of the first round. All these players, think about everybody that you drafted. Buzz. The only guy that wasn't a buzz is Kemba Walker, and because you're such a small market, you can't give him max dollars. But if you look at all the other guys, Kid Gilchrist and Adam Morrison and all these other guys, Skip, they've been bust. It's as simple as that. And so, Skip, the greater the player, I believe the greater the player, the harder it is for him to pick the talent. Because he's like, why can't you do? It was so easy for me. Yeah, that's why you were an all-time great, because you made it look easy. Everybody can't do that.
All right, we got to move on, guys. Did the Jets just sign an all-time great future Hall of Famer?